This is now Bridge to a Better World, and
we have a few moments.
We have a few moments, and this is one of those mornings where we just sort of more or less stumbled in here. And so as we wait just a few moments for all of you, hopefully by the millions to gather, we'll get the tin toys and such things. And I could make the tin toy noise now so you can know if you're listening by audio.
I'll move out of the tin toy way.
All right.
But we do have a couple minutes before 9, and yes, gather together, y'all.
Together, together. Together, 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 together. All right. News of the world. The Carnival of Truth Telling.
I like to think of all kinds of helpers in our world. There's no person in the whole world like you, and I like you just the way you are.
Oh, looks like chat's on. Wow. Just a minute or two now. I'm sure our makeup crew is working on Ani right now. Oh, look at that, I forgot my lipstick. I mean, the crew forgot my lipstick. Well, I just have to assume that my lips are there. Here we go. What do you think?
Let's do this thing.
Okay. I'm interrupting international flights.
I'm attempting to adjust our chat settings.
Huh.
It seems difficult at best. There we go. I think I've done it.
Oh, okay. So now chat is on. I said chat was on earlier, but I was lying.
It was. There's live chat. There's top chat. There's so much chat type. You don't even know.
Maybe we should exterminate chat. No.
No.
We like chat. This is now Bridge to a Better World. I'm Tiresias, and this is Ani Raven. And we're here to give our opinion and a little bit of a summary and analysis of the events of the past week. I want to start with corporate cause climate catastrophe. The word corporation is almost a synonym for arrogant, but Exxon takes the prize, especially for its greenwashing efforts. As a Greenpeace prank revealed earlier this year, Exxon calls the shots, owns the senators like Joe Manchin, and will say anything to keep polluting, keep sucking billions out of tax bases, and keep ruling this dying world. Exxon pays millions into the American Enterprise Institute nonprofit so that their employees can say things like, and this is a quote, "The Supreme Court has ruled in effect that individuals do not lose their First Amendment free speech rights merely because they have peaceably assembled into a corporation. You know, corporations are people. They're aggregations of investors and workers and all the rest," end quote. And we'll pause for a moment while we douse the flames that have appeared in our heads.
I threw up a little in my mouth. Peaceably assembling in their corporate ways.
That's just one of their institutes. There's the Petroleum Institute. Anyway, here's why that is an insidious lie. No one in a corporation. I mean, it needs to be said. You know,
no. Take it apart.
They get us so used. I mean, they get us to where we don't understand what a corporation is, and so no one in a corporation loses their free speech rights individually if the corporation is enjoined against lying propaganda. I mean, and it's something that should be done because lying with a powerful outlet like that is fraud. Corporations are not people. Corporations are not aggregations of investors and workers, and especially when they put workers in there, it pisses me off because workers are peons. I mean, they're serfs in a corporation, especially in a big corporation. Corporations, meaning, of course, nonprofit corporations, are totalitarian hierarchies. They can tell you what to wear, when to show up, when to leave forever. They own you. They are fictional constructs to allow the parasitic removal of the rights, knowledge, power, and earned wealth from workers, so that money can be removed to benefit the elite class. You got 1 million workers making $1,000 each profit, you got $1 billion. And that's how that works. But the general ignorance of that fact is essential to their rule. And rule is what they're about. We have a fully owned representative government of, by, and for the corporations, an oligarchic sham that keeps actual democratic rule to a minimum. It keeps voters away from important and generally agreed upon topics like rational distribution of wealth and popular control of the police and salvation of the environment. Quoting Maxine Joselo in Climate Wire, since 2017, 5 states and more than a dozen municipalities have sued fossil fuel companies over their contribution to and alleged deception about the dangers of global warming. The suit asks a slew of oil supermajors, including Exxon, BP, PLC, and Chevron Corporation, to help cover the costs of addressing hurricanes, wildfires, and other disasters fueled by rising global temperatures. Some of the more recent cases single out Exxon's social media posts as examples of greenwashing or the practice of making a company seem more sustainable than it really is. Take the lawsuit filed by New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio, a Democrat, on Earth Day. The complaint targets Exxon for bragging on Instagram about its commitment to capturing carbon dioxide, a potent planet-warming gas. Here's a quote from that. In a November 2020 Instagram post, ExxonMobil boasted that over the last 40 years, we have cumulatively captured most CO2 of any company, end quote. And that's according to their suit. The ad omitted, this is more quotes, this is a further quote, that during the same period of, I'm just quoting like hell. During the same period of time, ExxonMobil's operations and the use of its fossil fuel products have been one of the single largest sources of greenhouse gas emissions emitted into the Earth's atmosphere, end quote. Of course, we kind of know that, but it's hard to think about it clearly when you've got all this bullshit flowing into the environment directly from the corporations into their little institutes. American Petroleum Institute is one of them, and running Congress. As for comment, Hillary Meltzer, chief of the Environmental Law Division of the New York City Law Department, said in an email to E&E News, Quote, when fossil fuel companies run ads telling New York City consumers and residents about their commitment to clean energy, but then tell their investors that they plan to substantially increase fossil fuel production over 10, 20, or 30 years, that's greenwashing. That kind of behavior violates New York City's consumer protection law. That's why we're asking the court to hold these companies accountable, end quote. But accountability is still very, very far away, unlike the pollen pollutants in here. As this article in Brickhouse by Donald Shaw reveals, and we'll quote it, in the U.S., and by the way, this is a nonprofit effort to educate, and we're taking that aspect of the law to use these quotes. We're not making any money from this. In the U.S., a portion of the Democratic Party has acknowledged the importance of having policymakers not to be captured by the oil industry. More than 40 House Democrats have voluntarily pledged to reject any campaign money from the industry's PACs, executives, or lobbyists, insulating themselves from the potential influence of those financial favors and demonstrating to voters that they take the issue seriously. But the House Democrats' campaign fundraising arm has embraced oil lobbyist money. So far this year, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee's largest bundler of campaign funds is Zachary Pfister, or maybe it's Pfister, I don't know, the lobbyist for American Petroleum Institute trade association that promotes the interests of member companies including ExxonMobil, Chevron, ConocoPhillips, and Marathon Petroleum. Pfister has taken the DCCC $148,000 in bundled checks so far this year, according to FEC filings. Since 2018, he has given the group $966,000 in contributions. Bundling checks is a way for lobbyists to attach their names to large sums of money that they can offer as a benefit for the politicians and political party groups they are trying to influence for legislative favors. The money comes from their clients and other individuals and groups in their networks, thereby allowing them to give amounts far in excess of the legal maximum for an individual that is currently set at $36,500 per year. So $36,500 is too low for these guys. And bundling can also be just simply arranged by the CEO, and often is and occasionally is caught and appears before the public and the press, who I presume boredly pass on it. But that is done by you get a check from your corporation and a little letter with a check saying, don't you dare keep this. You can keep $10 of it, and the other $36,400, $36,500, no doubt, is to go to, and then they, line out their favorite fire-breathing MAGA head to destroy the environment with. And that's how that works. And it can work in various other ways. I mean, they can simply pressure you to contribute, and that is also bundling. So with that in mind, here are some of the ecological disasters that corporate-based climate change have brought us this week. And if you're wondering what the heck happened to headlines, here's the headlines. They're all environmental. From Washington Post, months remain until the peak of wildfire season in western U.S., but hundreds of blazes have already torched more than 1 million acres, pouring smoke into the skies and offering an ominous warning of what's ahead in the fall. Bone-dry conditions and anomalously high temperatures are fostering the perfect recipe for extreme wildfire danger, an issue that will only grow as the winds kick up in August and September. It's also making for extreme fire behavior. With rapid growth and spread of wildfires, several of which have grown large enough to create their own weather systems. The season has already featured the development of fire tornadoes, fire-induced thunderstorms and windstorms, and the ignition of new wildfires through barrages of dry lightning. And if you've seen those videos of the barrages of dry lightning, they go across the horizon, and they are absolutely terrifying and apocalyptic. It's just as bad as you think it could possibly be. Red flag warnings blanket much of the northwestern lower 48, stretching from the Badlands in the Dakotas, west through Montana and Idaho, including the Columbia River Basin, and highlighting parts of Oregon and Washington State as well. That's where the nation's largest wildfire is burning, end quote. And the bootleg fire is near 400,000 acres right now. That's as large as a small state. An army of firefighters is there in Southern Oregon, and some of them have caught COVID on the job. According to an article in Scientific American, 72% of the U.S. forests burned since 1984 burned last year. And this year is coming up to be worse than last year, and that's the sort of acceleration we're seeing. hockey stick straight off the graph, exponential in the extreme. And now we're seeing a worse year unfold before us. This is the global disaster that we've warned about most of our broadcasting careers. This is something we talk about when we take a car trip. It's like, when did we first say that? I remember in the 90s, I found the theory of what they then called the methane gun, the idea that if you get past a certain temperature, methane could explode out of the oceans and out of Siberia. And now we're seeing that begin to happen. And as I've often commented, we see now the acceleration taking place, and the disaster is right in front of our eyes and our noses.
Yeah, I remember Melody and I doing several shows in 95, 96, talking about 20 to 25 years before things got truly dire, time to make plans for when that happened.
For our kids and grandkids.
And then I started thinking last week, this is 20, 25 years from 1996.
Yep.
Did we actually listen to ourselves? How many plans did we make? Did we take ourselves seriously?
And what would seriously mean in an environment in which the corporations have so much power?
We did actually take ourselves seriously, but how do you prepare for global catastrophe?
Yeah, I kind of want to bring that up. It's like we shouldn't kick ourselves over this, because these corporations have agitated. They have vastly more power than we do. They are totalitarian hierarchies. They aggregate the wealth and the power. They own Congress. And so we can go out there, and as we did everything. I mean, we rode our bicycles.
They own the children.
We climbed up into trees and lived there to stop deforestation. We did so many things, but the fact is, it's going to take a really huge political convulsion, and it's going to be ugly. And I don't want it to be that way, but it has to be that way now to stop.
Well, it is. I mean, let's just look at it. It is ugly. I don't know. I heard you were talking about the world being on fire.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you had talked about Yakutsk.
No, please.
Okay.
Please talk about Siberia.
I'll throw in Siberia while we're talking about the world being on fire. Siberia. A monitoring service warned on Wednesday that the Siberian city of Yakutsk is experiencing an air apocalypse. That's because of devastating wildfires in the area, causing the air to be completely unbreathable. Throughout late Wednesday afternoon and early evening local time, according to Plume Labs, the air quality in Yakutsk ranged from dire to extreme to air apocalypse. So Yakutsk was forced to suspend flights at its airport due to poor visibility earlier this week. They're experiencing high levels of ozone, benzene, and hydrogen cyanide, thought to make this one of the world's worst ever air polluting events. Okay. So all of that said, they're experiencing the driest summer in the past 150 years in Yakutia, and the month of June was the hottest on record. So that together brought out some dry thunderstorms that occurred nearly daily throughout that area, and the dry conditions of those thunderstorms have brought about the significant wildfires. So that's what started it, but because of the extreme dry and hot conditions, that's right, much of Siberia is on fire.
And it's that sort of amplification that has caused the situation in which, especially a decade ago, the models were far too mild, because you mentioned that the ground is dry. This is what happened during our heat dome here. Therefore, the heat is hotter, and that sort of thing is all over the place. The glaciers melt, therefore they don't reflect the heat. The ice cap melts, therefore it doesn't reflect the heat. Everything gets hotter, and we now see the result. It's upon us. Oh yes, and thank you, Janet, for pointing out that I can't flop my papers on top of the live mic, which is down here somewhere. I don't know exactly where, but I can't flop my papers on it.
Don't flop your papers on.
From EurekaAlert.org, this description of the Amazon fires. A major drought and forest fire in the Amazon rainforest killed billions of trees and plants and turned one of the world's largest carbon sinks into the biggest polluters. Triggered by the 2015-16 El Nino, extreme drought and associated mega wildfires caused the death of around 2.5 billion trees and plants, and emitted 495 million tons of CO2 from an area that makes up just 1.2% of the entire Brazilian Amazon rainforest and 1% of the whole biome. The stark findings, discovered by an international team of scientists working for more than 8 years on a long-term study in the Amazon before. That's like a long-term study, but it's even longer, so I have to say it's longer. During and after the El Nino, either that or I'm just getting old, and have significant implications for global efforts to control the atmospheric carbon balance. In normal circumstances, because of high moisture levels, the Amazon rainforest does not burn. This is one of those statements like, duh. Of course it doesn't. I mean, how could it? But however,
it's a rainforest.
Yeah.
Everything is wet.
It has rain. However, extreme drought makes the forest temporarily flammable. Fires started by farmers can escape their land and trigger forest fires, they quote. The heat from all that burning contributes to wilder weather elsewhere. Here's a description of the situation in Europe from Bob Henson and Jeff Masters in Eureka Alert, quote, Central Europe's worst flooding in many decades has left the region in shock, with corridors of destruction carved across the landscape of Western Germany and Eastern Belgium. More than 200 people have died, at least 170 in Germany and 36 in Belgium, making it Europe's deadliest flood since 1985 and Europe's 10th deadliest flood in the past 100 years. Over 200 people remain missing, and the death toll may grow higher. And I always take that as, of course, the death toll will be much higher. The last flood to take so many lives, they write, in Germany was the massive North Sea coastal flood of '62, which killed 347 people. A multi-billion-dollar damage toll is assured, with huge amounts of infrastructure in ruins. Insurance broker Aon is estimating damages will exceed $10 billion, making it the costliest European flood disaster since the $13.2 billion 2013 Central European floods. The worst flooding played out in the western German states of Rhineland-Palatinate and North Rhine-Westphalia on the evening of Wednesday, July 14th. And I'll skip ahead of that, but that sort of climate hell, like the heat dome that hit the Pacific Northwest in June, can happen anywhere now. There are a few places anywhere on Earth that are ready for several inches of rain within an hour. Subways from China to New York have been subject to flooding. People drowned in China commuting in subway cars. And so that is the shape of the climate disaster. That is the intensity of the climate disaster. It ain't just you, and it ain't just here. And I'm kind of sorry to have to comment on that, but here we are. This is the world that we live in. For now, we are alive, and we must find ways to deal with it. I have brought up geoengineering before, and believe me, I found that idea repulsive for decades while I commented on and reported this sort of thing. And I thought also, though, rather cynically, that since the dynamics did not exist on the ground, have only begun to exist with Extinction Rebellion and groups like that, Greenpeace, etc., over the years, that we were headed for this ineluctably. And again, here we are.
It's, excuse me, for anyone to be denying that we are in climate crisis is just preposterous. So talk to folks however we can. This is, as we've known for 25 years and more, an emergency, and the emergency is truly on us. When we read the Amazon and Siberia and the Northwest are all on fire, all experiencing the driest, hottest records of our years, or of our recorded lives, the world is actually literally on fire. It's not just that figurative, let's look at the future. Oh no, it is literally on fire. It is time to treat this as the emergency it is. So what does that mean? It means throwing our bodies on the machinery, right? It means in that way of Mario Savo, there is a time when things become so odious that we cannot participate. And so I propose massive non-participation. I do believe in nonviolent protest, and I think that taking our power and organizing our power to say no We cannot go on with business as usual as the world is literally on fire. We cannot do this. That only makes sense to me. That is self-preservation. We need to organize with, friends, neighbors, family, and figure out how it is that we can elevate this to the emergency it is. Greta is right, but we can't just have a galvanizing figure. It has to be all of us. And so this is one of the biggest emergencies. I mean, really, one of the biggest emergencies that we could possibly face. It's existential crisis. It's our lives on this planet. So what do we do?
One of the benefits of the lawsuit that's brought by the kids and the nun is that they brought out the documents that show how vigorously corporations like Exxon and Shell planned to confuse us and to prevent action over global warming, which we now know they clearly knew was happening and was their fault. Their criminality is on display in those lawsuit documents. And so I recommend that you look that up, and it'll put a fire under you.
To me, at this moment in our lives, we're watching a billionaire space race. And we have such very real issues in terms of global warming, famine, and health crises globally, that their billions of dollars could actually do some good, but instead they're dick waving into space. And the accumulation of that wealth has been part of the problem all along. I just had to blurt this out because, frankly, for the last couple of days, it has been going around in the back of my head that we have these problems of global warming that have been caused and led by misinformation and flat out lies from the corporations to serve their own interests over the interests of the planet and people. And now we have, these leaders of industry are our generation's robber barons, frankly, who are sending themselves into space
It's obscene.
at an obscene rate.
And that kind of brings
it has left that, my God, this is obscene. What world do we live in? And I just had to blurt.
Just to see them giggling and tossing balls to each other in space. But it kind of brings me to something that I think we can use for a segue here, which is the fact that these preparations, these direct manipulations, these well-funded acts of criminality, we can now look at them more clearly and see the pattern. For example, Paul Weyrich and Pat Buchanan, way back when, it's been decades now, actively decided that in order to create a determined and fanatic conservative, hyper-conservative base and to divide the nation, they would crank up the issue of abortion. They drew up the documents, much like the documents that we now see for confusing the issue over climate change. They created the issue of abortion in the United States. And now we see this taking fruition as the Supreme Court has been packed by the conservatives. And well, you have the news, I believe.
No, you let off this morning. Well, you let off to me talking about the case in Missouri. If you want to talk about specifics of that, please go right ahead.
I don't have the specifics. I just know generally that Missouri has, introduced a law which would violate Roe v. Wade, and so they are taking that directly to the Supreme Court and saying, okay, now we have this majority, so let's destroy, let's destroy Roe v. Wade, and with it, women's right to choose permanently in the United States, and so they're. That is going to be considered. It'll be some months as it cooks slowly through the Supreme Court system, but that's on their platter now. That's what's happening. And so over to you, someone who knows this issue so much better than I possibly could.
Okay. Well, what I would, there's a couple of things, right, that are going on, and I should have opened these links. Look at me handling too many things at once. Sorry about that.
Well, I remember that we used to be more. We were directly involved when I first met you in the 90s. We would actually go out and counter the demonstrators, And you have to do that carefully because, I mean, people are trying to get to the clinic to get an abortion.
Yeah, you don't want to create more of an atmosphere of tension
'cause
for women seeking health services, right?
Yeah.
Because it's preposterous. Abortion is a health service, right? I believe there was a bumper sticker in the 80s that said abortion is a sacred act. I still think that. I think most health services are a sacred act. Here's the thing. We know that there is a number of states that have really put forth restrictive abortion laws. States that are trying to take the age of the gestation of 15 weeks, which is about 8 weeks earlier than Roe, to say anything past that would be an illegal act, or to restrict abortion access in various ways. I believe it's Missouri that is trying to take out all funding from Planned Parenthood. Yes, Missouri. And so I'm not sure, frankly, if this is the case that's about to go, that this can't be, right? Maybe it's the case. But it's a bill that would block Planned Parenthood from treating patients who receive Medicaid. So that's the attack on Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood is a nonprofit service, a nonprofit medical clinic chain that provides many, many services. It's not just abortion providers. And so the state, Missouri's sole abortion clinic is Planned Parenthood in St. Louis. That is the only abortion clinic in Missouri. And Planned Parenthood operates a network of other clinics throughout the state that don't provide abortion services. But their bill would deny Medicaid payment to any Planned Parenthood in the state for any service because it would be within a network and affiliated with abortion providers. So to be of this mindset, right, to be a forced birther, to want to restrict abortion access for the sake of saving the babies, we all know that that is not the goal. Their goal is not to save the babies. If they were just loving all the babies, you wouldn't see these same people, voting against funding for schools, voting against funding for healthcare, voting against funding for childcare and for parental support. You wouldn't see those things. So this is about controlling bodies. This is about enforcing conformity. And what I wanted to really talk about was the overlay of the states that seek to restrict abortion, that are also seeking to restrict and roll back the rights of the LGBTQ folks. The same states that are restricting access to trans healthcare are the same states that want to restrict access to abortion. And I think that this really speaks of a larger dynamic. It sort of lays bare what is really at issue here, and that is to be outside of the patriarchalist, cis, heteronormative Christian mindset, that if you are not cis, straight, and well ensconced in your appropriate gender roles, you must be punished. And that is really at issue here. So they will attempt to remove all abortion access. That is a terrifying thought. And they will also seek to restrict all rights to trans healthcare. Because, again, this is about bodily autonomy and about being able to live our lives free of the heteronormative cis patriarchy. They don't like to let folks out of their control. That's really an issue. And so, did you have more to say on that?
Oh, well, it just reminds me of the fact that this works so well in terms of propaganda. One reason is because, conservatives know that they're being bloody imperialist bastards, for example. They know that they're murdering people. This is not something that they allow to float up to their conscious mind, but it's in there somewhere. And they know that they have raised their sons to be killers. They know that they're being absolutely, unacceptably, unendurably cruel to people, to kids crossing the border, that they are violating their Christian the direct commands of Jesus to be kind, to treat your neighbor as yourself. They know this, so they're suppressing it, and this creates a little bit of cognitive dissonance with themselves because they want to think of themselves as righteous and kind and all about love. And so the abortion debate comes and says, look, we want you to stand up for this blastocyst, which is the size and the approximate development of a flea, and pretend that it is already a human being and that you are protecting its rights, and that you are standing up for the innocent and for, and then we get these religious ideas, flavors coming in, the idea that these are angels and absolutely innocent. And so you become, instead of an oppressor and someone who has blood on their hands, you become this great saint who is looking after the absolute innocent, the connected to God embryo, which they always show as much closer to birth than what it's like. This is not the speck that is or the tiny little less than a thumb size piece of tissue not ready for consciousness that is ejected from women as part of abortion. And it's that delusion is very powerful and works great for them. So, but it's performative, and we need to call it out because it's the forced birth crowd is about this kind of bullshit. They're not saving anyone
about control.
Yeah, any human consciousness from suffering.
And so, I have a lot of thoughts on abortion as somebody who worked at abortion clinic for 4 years, who assisted many women through that procedure, who talked to many women about how it is they came to be at the clinic, because they wanted to share that information with me, not because we would ever ask, because that's no one's business, right? You don't ask somebody why they've come in to get their tooth fixed. You don't ask somebody why they've come in to get their blood pressure checked. You don't ask somebody why they've come in to get an abortion, right? This is no one's business. But we've always thought of this, and American society has really had a lot of moral issue with this over the last 30, 40, 45, 50 years. And especially, as Teresa had mentioned earlier, it was a fairly jaded, really, a cynical effort to divide the country, and divide the country it did. So I wanted to also mention there's an article in The Blade, which is a queer newspaper, that does actually, I'm going to quote it here, talk about law in Texas and how it actually directly relates to the LGBTQ community. There is a new law in Texas that offers up a $10,000 bounty for people who help those who have uteruses access abortion. So I'm now just going to go ahead and quote the article. This is now a terrifying concern for abortion providers, advocates of women's reproductive rights, and those who value civil liberties, especially for people in Texas. If you value the right to privacy and your LGBTQ or queer ally, you should be terrified. Here's why everyone with a sense of decency should feel the hair standing up on the back of their necks. It's no secret that the Supreme Court, more conservative than any court since the 30s, is likely eyeing the chance to overthrow or gut R v. Wade. In May, the Supreme Court said in its next term, which begins in October, that it would consider an abortion case involving a Mississippi law that prohibits abortions after 15 weeks. Again, that's 8 weeks earlier than Roe, more or less. The court's decision to consider this case gives hope to anti-abortion activists seeking to overthrow Roe. States with Republican-controlled legislatures, aware of the makeup of the Supreme Court with its conservative 6-3 majority, have acted quickly to severely weaken abortion rights to get those up to the court. More abortion restrictions, 90 of them, have already been enacted in 2021 than in any year since the Roe v. Wade decision was handed down in 73. That's according to the Guttmacher Institute. Excuse me. In May of this year, Greg Abbott, governor of Texas, signed a draconian abortion bill into law. That measure is known as a heartbeat law, bans abortion after 6 weeks of pregnancy. And I want to make it very clear that's before most women actually know they may be pregnant. That's bad enough, according to this article. Other states, including Ohio, Georgia, Louisiana, Missouri, Alabama, Kentucky, and South Carolina, have all passed heartbeat laws banning abortion when a fetal heartbeat can be detected. The legislation signed into law this spring by Abbott is even more insidious than the others. This legislation, scheduled to take effect in September of this year, that's 2 months from now, right? Gives private citizens, more like 5 weeks, gives private citizens the right to sue doctors and abortion clinic employees. And it does not stop there. The new law permits a private citizen, anyone from an Uber driver to your pastor to some friend that maybe you now have a falling out with, maybe a family member or a perfect stranger that just has some suspicions, might have overheard you talking, to sue anyone who performs or helps anyone to get an abortion. Right? It does not stop there. The new law permits a private citizen to sue anyone who performs or helps anyone to get an abortion.
Can I interrupt there for a second?
Even private citizens not living in Texas could sue people performing or helping someone to get an abortion. Go ahead.
It's just I don't have legal training. I'm not a lawyer. Don't understand this, but it brings up questions like, so a law can give someone standing to have a suit against someone where you would not normally have legal standing? That doesn't sound like it would work. I don't think. I'd like to know. I mean, it's pretty bizarre.
And I've heard this, and it's rattled around in my head. But reading this article a couple days ago, just kind of made me pop. And so it sets up a dangerous slope, right? It's like
just aggressive as hell, for one thing.
It's aggressive as hell, right? So Texas's new law prohibits state officials from enforcing it. It's set up to be enforced by private citizens. We had to devise a unique strategy to fight this subversive law, says Nancy Northrup, president and chief executive of the Center for Reproductive Rights. And she says that we will pursue every legal avenue we can to block this pernicious law. It sets up a dangerous slippery slope, as you might just go ahead and guess, right? You can see that one through. If a private citizen is allowed to sue anyone assisting a woman having an abortion, what would prevent anyone, who is a queer ally, who again, could be queers are next on the block. It's just the whole bodily autonomy, the patriarchy in your bedroom. This is not freedom. It's not really a great way to wrap that up, but it makes my head explode.
Well, and it lures people.
It's not freedom. This is not the way.
Yeah. And we can see that it lures people, masses of people, into this, effort to achieve this false moral superiority and to have hegemony and power over women. And so they are busy and divided doing that. And we all need them to stop that nonsense and come over and fight against corporate caused climate catastrophe. I just wanted to say that because it's alliterative. Climate. Oh, never mind.
Corporate cause climate
Corporate cause.
catastrophe.
Thank you very much. Yes, the CCCC.
Yes. There's a lot to be said here. And to me, it's just indicative that we are really in the throes of a culture war, that there are those that believe in science and those that don't, those that support individual rights to bodily autonomy and those that don't. Strangely, those that believe in science and those that believe in the rights of bodily autonomy tend to be in the same crowd. Go figure. Living lives of reason and such. Where to go? It feels really, I won't say bleak, because I do feel like there's a lot of folks who are aware, who are moving things on. And certainly I feel like we're in a better position than we have been recently. But there is so much backlash, right? There is so much backlash. There is so much fight against any erosion of the damage Trump did, right? And so we're in this pendulum swing. And I do feel like it is really important to jump that pendulum and help it swing hard left. We really do need to be on our guard around issues of the abortion erosion, as well as reproductive rights in general. That moral superiority, looking at a rise in Christian in theocracy. That is actually, I guess, what I am worried about, the climate change and a rise in the theocracy. Because again, that theocracy is very invested in eroding reproductive rights, as well as eroding any rights for the LGBTQ community, as well as eroding anything, any advances that feminism has brought us for women having, our own bank accounts, our keeping our own names throughout our lives, that sort of thing, having our own identity. But other than that,
the general equation for the hyper-conservatives or the reactionaries, or whatever you want to call them, is you give up rational process and the power and autonomy that you have through that for a false sense of belonging and community.
Yeah. I wanted to address a couple of comments from Janet, and thank you, Janet, for your comments. I think that when it comes to Janet suggests paternity testing for any. I'm just going to read that comment. Excuse me. I'd like to see a law that would ensure that a single mom's baby was paternity tested to find out who the dad was, and then make him pay to support the mom and the baby. I think that has some merit. But I also think that there is also a problem of classism in general, that if everyone is saying that an abortion is an appropriate solution or an appropriate answer, then to say, well, if they're not accessible, the man would just have to pay, doesn't necessarily help that guy have an income. And we know that capitalism squashes people, regardless of gender, actually. So I think that I've often seen that as a really good point of argument.
I like the sentiment, though.
And I love the sentiment.
Yeah, you want to.
But it doesn't actually work when we break it down.
Yeah, tie a knot in it, Rufus.
Against abortion, have a vasectomy. Yeah. I think that one is fantastic. But again, putting I get what I think that the deeper meaning there is to make sure that people understand that if there is a pregnancy, two people have created that pregnancy, and not just the person who is bearing the baby at that point, who is then suddenly very controlled by the state. And I think that is essential, that has to, we have to actually look at responsibility and the fact that there are two people involved. It's not a fallen woman or, this sort of thing. And that is terminology, again, that I haven't heard the words fallen woman, but certainly the language of purity is coming back, and that is just absolutely terrifying. Where have we come from? Where have we, what are we turning back to? Can we stomp this thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
I have a lot, actually. I have not been particularly focused on writing for this podcast, as you can tell. But I have been doing a lot of thinking about reproductive rights in general, as it is a story that is very close to my heart, having worked in the abortion clinic, having heard all those stories, also having been an adoptee. I was adopted at birth, and one of the things we realized at the abortion clinic was that more than half of us were adopted at birth, or as infants anyway. Out of a staff of about 12 or 13, 6 of us were adoptees. And that beats any odds. it made us sort of talk about the fact that we realized reproductive rights were essential to women's lives, to the lives of anyone who can bear a child. And so in that, over this last month, I have been doing a lot of thinking as my bio mother is visiting me. We've been developing our relationship for 35 years now, and we're really close. And to hear her story of what was behind her decisions and what was behind my adoption, and to really spend time pondering that has been a really deep experience that I'm hoping to write about for a future episode. But it's to immediately start thinking about the restriction of abortion access and the return of purity standards is devastating. It is devastating to families and to children, as well as to the people that bear them. So more on that later. But are we ready to sort of wrap? I have some tarot cards.
Yes, let's get intuitive. Fortunately, we have a witch.
Right. So for this week, I'm using a deck called the Joie de Vivre deck. And what we have are the Two of Swords, the Five of Cups, and the Ten of Cups. This talks about balancing your analysis. It talks about sharpening your analysis and jumping when it's time to jump, knowing that you have a strong connection to what needs to happen. Your analysis has informed you. You have done the mental agility. You have figured things out. And so now it's time to trust the process and jump and take that leap. There's an issue around scarcity as well, feeling that things are scarce, whether they are or not. And the Five of Cups really is a card of crying over spilt milk. It's the card of the loss is so painful, the fear is so big that you're missing the gifts that are actually set up all around you. And so don't let this really color that leap that you have to take, right? Get clear. You don't want to act out of fear. You don't want to restrict your options out of fear. You want to resolve. That's the word I'm looking for. You want to resolve the scarcity issues. You want to actually get past that grief and fear that's holding you back. Recognize the blessings and goodness, and then take that leap of whatever it is, that next path, that next decision, to do something great. And then it'll be actually true cause for celebration. The Ten of Cups talks about really deepening our heart connections. That leap of faith could very well be doing something to strengthen the bonds of your community, talking to your neighbors, maybe for the first time in a while, reconnecting and deepening connections in community. Could well be about that. And then bringing that celebrating energy, that coming together in sort of a grander way. A fullness of heart and connection. And we are coming up on Lammas, which is the first harvest that is in the beginning of August. So harvesting the first fruits, harvesting our intentions of this year is sort of the theme of the season we're slipping into. And the Ten of Cups really speaks about that fullness of the heart and celebration together. And it's always sort of reminded me of the harvest of first fruits. So in the timing of things, be careful with each other, trust your perception, deepen connections, look for the blessings around you, don't fall into fear, and celebrate each moment, celebrate each other.
Well said.
And this is now we hope to bridge to a better world. Thank you so much for joining us. Yes, indeed, John. Let's talk sometime. Thank you for being with us this morning, and we'll be back again next week.
And our love goes out to you and to all the ships at sea.